Blog Talk Radio.
It's the Jenny Hatch Show on Blog Talk Radio, and I'm your host. Today's show is a continuation of the show I did a few days ago. It's titled Introduction to the Natural Family Blog. I've been blogging now for 5 years, and when I first started, I spent a few weeks typing out all of my political philosophy in an introductory post that would hopefully help convey to anyone who is interested what my political beliefs were and what my goals were for the blog. And that introduction has largely remained the way I wrote it for the past 5 years. I first published it on July 4th, 2005. And it's been edited just a little bit over the years. I took out certain links that were broken and a few passages that didn't really fit anymore. But by and large, the whole thing has pretty much stayed the same for the past 5 years. And I'm going to begin with the portion that's titled Reformation. The first part of the introduction is an hour-long podcast that includes passages of Scripture, my political background and history, my political philosophy, and also my experiences with interfacing with the medical profession. The thesis of my blog is that at some point we're going to need an amendment to the American Constitution to guarantee medical rights the same way that we guarantee religious rights. And this is articulated by a signer of the Declaration of Independence named Benjamin Rush, who was a doctor and is considered the father of modern psychiatry today. And in his quote, back in the day, he made the case that we needed to have this amendment to the Constitution, and that if we didn't have it, there would be a form of medicine that would rise up and take over and deny equal privileges, not only to those practicing medicine and health care, but those who wanted to purchase what those healthcare providers wanted to buy. This is interesting because just yesterday my friend Sarah Buckley, who's a doctor down in Australia, posted on her Facebook that the only hospital catering and supporting home birth midwives as their medical backup in New York City in 2 weeks is going to have to shut its doors for financial reasons. And this has been a pattern throughout American history, especially the last 50 years, that whenever there was a maverick group of doctors and midwives who opened birth centers, hospitals that catered to women who wanted to have natural childbirth, that it was only a matter of time before they were sort of chased out of town or shut down for one reason or another. And this happened here in Boulder, Colorado, where I live. The birth center that had been so lovingly put in place by a group of independent thinking doctors and midwives had to shut down after a short span of time because it just the medical people were just too powerful. So this is happening. You know, the promotion of home birth is the number one goal of my blog, and I've predicted on my blog that we will in America see the day come when home birth midwives are completely shut out from the practice of childbirth. And I believe that day is fast approaching, and that the only answer for families in the short term is going to be taking personal responsibility for every facet of their own health care, and especially for their childbirth. So this is something that I've come to over many years of study and research, and it's a deeply held belief that not only will we parents who take this stance and just say, no, we're not going to bow down to the medical gods need to do this, but our doing this will force them to their knees, literally, to where they just, you know, there will be so many of us doing this that they can't lock us all up, so they'll have to stop and change the laws. Either that's going to happen, or so many women will just finally say, "I've had enough. Not going to take it anymore." They'll leave the medical form of birth. But I still don't see that happening for many years, like 50, 100 years. So that's going to be down the road. But for the short term, I do want to challenge anybody listening, if you're planning on being a mother, a father, to take personal responsibility for your life. You may feel like that degree on the wall of your doctor or even your midwife's medical examining room means that they know a whole lot about birth, but generally what it means is that they know a whole lot about interventions and a lot of medical procedures and drugs that can be used to help when things go wrong. And it's my contention that most of the time things go right, and that if we just get out of the way, the vast majority of the babies in the world and in America especially, where we have plenty of clean water and fresh food and everybody's into exercise and yoga and taking good care of themselves, the vast majority of us could easily give birth at home if that's what we wanted. So here's the end part of my introduction. Again, it begins with the word reformation, and I will just go ahead and read this through and post it up on my blog next to the introduction so that if you come across it and you just don't feel like reading all this text, you can just click the play button and listen to the introduction without having to sit there and read. Hugh Hewitt claims in his book blog that the Reformation came about largely from the invention of the printing press. It did, but it was those martyrs willing to take the fruits of the printing press, most notably the scriptures, and share them with the common men and women who made the invention of the printing press effective. These truth warriors who fought and died for the right to own and memorize scripture laid the foundation for the enlightenment that followed the Reformation. Like the Waldensians of old and the greatest reformer of all, John Wycliffe, who died fighting for the truth, I believe individual families have the power to break down the monopoly of allopathic medicine simply by walking away from it and being willing to live with the consequences of that action. What are those consequences? For our family, the consequences have not been too harsh, as we have lived in a home birth mecca here in Boulder, Colorado. But I believe it would be naive to think that families who give birth at home do not have any negative results. The point of focus for the past 200 years, at least in America, and lately more around the world, has been on the midwives, shutting them down, putting them out of practice, and in more extreme instances, in jail. But as the powers that be realize the scope and power of the free birth movement, I predict that they will attempt to intimidate individual families. The homeschooling movement in America has an interesting history. The pioneers of the 60s and 70s had some truly harrowing experiences as they attempted to free their children from the Marxist wasteland and teach them some truth and how to read. Like these pioneering parents who have largely had great success in education, I predict that the unassisted childbirth movement will grow exponentially as the truth about medical birth becomes more available to the average consumer, and parents refuse to cave to the pressure to spend the money for mothers and babies to be cut away from each other. I also predict that as soon as the medical profession perceives that our movement is strong enough that we are depriving them of money, the backlash to our efforts will be immediate and harsh. I believe an all-out war against free birth will be declared and carried out in the media, in the chat rooms, in the blogs, and on the front lines in communities as the social workers, police, and medical workers realize that a growing group of families are unwilling to purchase what the doctors have to sell. The term medical neglect should have chilling sensations associated with it. At least for me it does. However, because birth is a life or death matter for both the mother and the baby, the emotions tied to this movement are going to be heightened to a much higher degree than the homeschooling movement ever was. Home educators simply wanted to teach their own children. And while this has had a devastating impact on the monopoly of the educrats and their socialist vision for